Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod Roku TV's World Edition. And from wherever you are in the world, we'll welcome you to our show, which I am hosting from Morrisville, North Carolina, the All-America city in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, the 8th largest state in the United States of America. On this show, we talk about global affairs, innovation, following the daily events going on in Ukraine with the war, and what the new normal of the pandemic is today in the United States and around the world. Today, I have to change my monologue because I was going to talk about Ukraine and an immigrant from Ukraine in North Carolina, Misha Shevitz. And we'll be doing that on Monday, or actually Tuesday, because on Monday, we have a special guest. Most likely, we will be having Andy Andrews, former board member of the United States Tennis Association and one of the greatest tennis players in North Carolina history, who played on the ATP Tour in the 1980s. He's going to come and talk about his induction into the USTA Southern Hall of Fame and what he thinks we can learn from the game of tennis in our business life, as he's done a very good job transitioning into real estate. I'll be working with Mark Lee on that show. Now, my monologue today. Yesterday, a game changer in the history of the United States of America. The Senate voted to confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the United States Supreme Court, making her the first Black woman to serve on our high court and confirming her as the 116th justice in United States history to receive bipartisan backing with a final vote of 53 to 47 in the upper chamber. 3 Republicans, Senator Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Mitt Romney of Utah, cast this vote, and history was made. Vice President Kamala Harris, the first woman of color to hold the role, presided over the Senate during the vote. Jackson's appointment to the court is to be a significant component of President Biden's legacy and marks the first opportunity he has had to make his imprint on the Supreme Court. She will not take the bench immediately, as Justice Stephen Breyer, whose suit she will fill, is poised to retire at the end of the Supreme Court's term this summer. President Biden watched with emotion as the vote came in and gave her an embrace in the Roosevelt Room in the White House. It was a merry moment to see that picture. As Senator Schumer said, it's a wonderful day, a joyous day, an inspiring day for the Senate, for the United States of America. Today is one of the brightest lights, and let us hope it's a metaphor, an indication of many more bright lights to come. Approval of this nomination by an evenly divided Senate capped the confirmation process that was marked by Republican attempts to paint Jackson as soft on crime, an activist judge who would legislate from the bench. But this simply did not work. These criticisms were rooted in her sentencing record in child pornography cases while she was a federal trial court judge, and accusations that were provided by Republicans with fodder as they positioned themselves as law and order party ahead of the November midterm elections. So we don't know whether this is a win politically for President Biden from that perspective, but certainly it showed that these attempts by the Republicans did not work. The Senate leaders moved swiftly to begin the confirmation process after Mr. Biden, a former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, announced Jackson as his pick. So it's over, folks. Ketanji Brown Jackson is now the newest Supreme Court member. Now, this doesn't change the majority of the court, which is conservative Republican majority, but it will be the first time in the history of our nation where the high court is now held by 4 women. I hope that some young Black girl watching today, or some woman of a Hispanic heritage or Asian heritage, or anyone in America, can now look at the court and say that our court truly represents that in the United States of America, you can achieve your greatest dreams through hard work, through perseverance and dedication. My final point is I didn't know what tie I was going to wear today, but I wore purple. Purple because, yes, sometimes Republicans and Democrats can work together in our country, believe it or not, to get things done. And that's what they have done yesterday to make history in the Republic of the United States of America. We congratulate Judge Jackson, and we look forward to her serving on the bench at the end of the summer. Now let's get started. Today we have with me Mark Lee, my co-producer, and Nick P.O.D, and Chris Greco, our military analyst. And I wanted to, and Sasha Starr from Ukraine. our foreign policy analysis. So let's take a few minutes before we go into the Ukraine war or daily update, just a little bit about the Jackson nomination. I'm going to start with Mark Lee as an African American man, a black man whose mother ran for Secretary of State, come from a legacy of really great leaders. What is your thoughts today?
No, definitely, like you said, glad that she won the seat. I don't know how much bipartisan support there was, as only three folks crossed the aisle and all of that. But I was glad to see those three cross the aisle. Wish there had been more bipartisan support in that sense, as she was definitely, as Chris has said several times, very much of a qualified person and all of that, and definitely had a good history. And I felt that more should have crossed that line, and even seeing some of the divides that we have seen, as I believed the majority, if not all of the Republicans walked out after the appointment was done. So while there is bipartisan support there, I wish that there was more of it, and we are still seeing some of the political divides that are existing, whether that's around politics, whether that's around race, whether that's around gender, whether that's around a number of other things, including orientation and all of that. But I do agree with something you said, that I hope that whether it was her election or the election of Kamala Harris and a number of others that have taken place, that will give hope for some young person that is thinking that that's a job that they might want in the near future. If that is something that they're thinking about in terms of their own legacy and something that they aspire to, that maybe they aspire to be a judge or a lawyer, and that they will look into that, and then maybe sometimes later they could become the second person of the second woman or the second minority, or in that case would be the third African American, if they were to get appointed down in the distant future and all of that. And it would actually be about the fourth or fifth woman. But I do hope that it represents more of what our society looks like, and that more people are looked at, and that they're looked at for their qualifications. I'm actually a big believer of what Martin Luther King said about looking at people for the content of their character and all of that. So definitely, I do hope that that vision is still out there, even though sometimes it seems like we are a long way away from Dr. King's vision that he talked about on that mountaintop. But like I said, sometimes I'm very hopeful, and other times I'm thinking that Dr. King would have been very disappointed about what has happened in 2022 in some ways, even though I think he would have been quite pleased with what happened in the Supreme Court. But there are other things that we are still facing that he talked about, including wars and including economic injustices and a number of other things. But I'd love to hear maybe Chris's thoughts, but those are some of my immediate thoughts as I am thinking about this historical moment.
Yes, Chris, what are your thoughts? Just real quickly, a thought from everybody, and then we're going to go right into Ukraine. But Chris, what are your thoughts today?
So, welcome from Charleston, South Carolina. I'm down here for an air show. The Air Force is putting on the Air Force Base down here in Charleston, which was the ones who provided the aircraft to transport Afghanistan people out of Afghanistan. So they're going to have all kind of good stuff here from Charleston. So I'm really happy. Hence the Air Force hat. But let's go to Ketanji Brown Jackson. First of all, it was a done deal. It was a done deal the day that President Biden nominated her. She was going in. Now, there's three Republicans that said that they would go over. The first one was Susan Collins. Susan Collins, I looked at her background and everything else. She has voted with the president almost in every single nomination of Supreme Court justices. She's very, very fair from that standpoint. The other one is Lisa Murkowski. Lisa Murkowski is coming up for re-election in Alaska. Didn't have much of a choice. She had that, and she's moving. She was an anti-Trumper, so she kind of moved away from that. And the third one was Utah.
Mitt Romney.
Yeah, Mitt Romney. And Mitt Romney has been, I can't believe we put him up as a presidential candidate. This guy has been going back and forth between situations. I don't know what he is, whether he's a Republican, a Democrat, whatever else. But if I were a Republican in the Senate, I'm telling you right now, Steve, Mark, Sasha, vote for her. What difference did it make not voting for her? I do not understand. I get it. Sometimes it's a 12-year-old policy thing. Well, this is what you did to Kavanaugh, so this is what we're going to do to Ketanji Brown Jackson. This is what you did to Gabor, so this is what we're going to do. Come on, cut me a break. Just she's a qualified individual. Screw the color of the skin. Just she's qualified. She's nominated by the president. Put her in place. I mean, I don't understand what the big deal is on either side of this thing. So that's my take on it.
Hey, before we get to Sasha, just really quickly, because like you said, you were in Charleston. I just wanted folks to listen that are in the international world and everything about Charleston. Charleston is a very lovely city. I actually had the pleasure of going there years ago, actually for some friends of mine that are in the labor movement. They were actually having their conference there around labor issues and things around that nature. But I just love the historical elements of Charleston. It's a very pretty city and definitely is a very cultural city as well. And y'all know I love my culture and all of that. But definitely, I just wanted to know if you were getting a chance to enjoy any of that, because I definitely am a big fan. Even I've only been there maybe once or twice, but what I saw of Charleston, I have very much loved.
Well, we went downtown, and it's the one thing I said, "What's that building there that's sitting there?" And my daughter, who was stationed down there as an Air Force reservist, and her basically her fiance, who's also down here, said, "Oh, that's the marketplace." And I said, "The marketplace? What?" And they said, "That's where they sold slaves." And I said, "What?" I said, and I looked at it and I thought, "Wow, man!" And they kept the building. They said, "Yeah, it's now basically a marketplace where they have marketing and everything else there." And I said that's just amazing, because what's happening up here in North Carolina is they have that one area, you know about it, Mark, where they had the market area, and they're renaming that, redoing that area. But it's pretty amazing. I mean, the historical aspects is just something that just kind of blew my mind. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Definitely. Sasha, your thoughts?
Sasha, any thoughts before we get into Ukraine?
Well, listen, she projects really well. In my opinion, she's obviously dignified, super qualified woman. It's I was a little bit upset by the process where Republican lawmakers were trying just to get attention to themselves and speak a lot of absurdities. And if that was their goal, they've achieved that. And what good does it do for a country? Nothing at all, just for their constituencies, just to please Mr. Trump. And that's about it. And I'm not pleased with that. And I don't know if many people are.
Yeah, well, I think it's just the continued bitterness and division. President Trump is coming to North Carolina tomorrow, to Selma, North Carolina, to support Bo Hines and Ted Budd, who's running for the U.S. Senate. Bo Hines most likely running against either Senator Wiley Nichols, state senator, or former state senator Sam Searcy. But there's a big pouring of support. We'll see, whether or not this is going to work. But the constant, claims of conspiracy theories, rigging elections, building the wall, guns. I mean, this is the campaign that they're running. But let's turn to another part of the world that has all of our attention, and that is Ukraine. I'm going to give you a couple of just kind of highlights of, as the host of this show, I have to keep up with what's going on. So let me pull my notes real quick. Sorry, guys, having some issues today. So the Western nations have escalated their economic pressure on Russia. The EU has approved a ban on Russian coal, and Congress has voted to strip Russia's trading privileges with the U.S. Russia attacked a train station used by thousands of people trying to flee eastern Ukraine, and the Russians have discussed killing of civilians in radio traffic intercepted by Germany. So they've caught them on tape, folks. And pregnant women are being shuttled in and out of Ukraine out of bomb shelters. The situation is so dire. I got to be honest with you that I, really have a hard time seeing some of these images on television. Yesterday, I saw a picture of a mother in it might be Romania or Mexico, in a shelter, just with one bed and just crying, holding her daughter, not knowing what the future is going to hold. So the situation is getting worse, Sasha. What what do you think needs to be done now? Or is this thing going to drag out for 6 months, a year?
Not necessarily so. All Ukraine needs is um, to serve severe blow to Russian army. And now, when the heavy artillery, harpoons, missiles, and all tanks and planes, it's all now coming to Ukraine. You will see what Ukraine will do. Situation, though, is difficult right now because Russians are mounting offensive in eastern part of the country, in Donbas area. And before Ukrainians will do this blow, they have to withstand the Russian attack in next 2-3 days or so. So that's the situation right now. I'm pretty sure that Ukraine will prevail in this war, but I would like to see it really soon, really like in 2-3 weeks, because people are being killed, innocent people, civilians, women, kids. That atrocity of Russian army. It's not really a Russian army, mind you, because there are a lot of non-Russian nationalities, but it doesn't make situation any better. The people who did this butcher's job in Bucha and other Kiev's um, surroundings, they are from the private group, so-called Wagner. It's a private Putin's army, and that's a way they've operated in Syria. So they've just demonstrated who they are, what they are. But Ukrainians now know all their names. I must assure you, they will be all individually punished in next month, year, 10 years, whatever it will take.
So, Chris Greco, thank you, Sasha, so much. As a military analyst, real quickly before we go to Mark, as sort of a military analyst, a lot of generals following Russia, not sure what kind of intelligence we're getting. As a military, someone that understands tactics, the military, is Putin losing or winning this war? Or do you think it's too early to tell?
First of all, I don't know whether you got. I don't know whether any of you know this, but I have news that Mexico is siding with Russia against America. The enemy of my enemy is my friend type thing. They are trading with Russia at this point. They are accepting imports from Russia. They just had the Russian ambassador down there. The president had him down there. I mean, Mexico is, I think, they're saying, well, it was all caused because Trump called, the immigrants rapists and murderers, which that isn't what he said, but that's what they're taking. That's what they're going. But I mean, that's fine, whatever. Now, I don't know exactly what Canada's all about. Sasha, you're a Canadian. Maybe you can tell me. Canada, I don't think is really happy with America at this point in time. And I don't see, now maybe you know more than I do, but we're shipping cash like crazy to Ukraine. I mean, millions of dollars. Has Canada, what is Canada, I'm not saying it in a flippant manner, I'm saying it, what has Canada provided in the way of arms? What have they provided in anything else? Because right now, Russia should be losing the war. I mean, absolutely losing the war. All they're doing is they're firing artillery, they're firing missiles, rockets, whatever, just into buildings, into anything they can, just to basically demoralize the Ukrainian population and kill whoever they can kill. So I just don't. I mean, I guess I don't get it.
I don't get it either with Mexico, but I had a question for you, Chris, really quickly, if I can, and everything, because apparently, we've been definitely ragging, and rightfully so in my mind, several times on Trump, but actually a president that I do admire, and I think he might have worked under him and everything, has also gotten a little bit of flack as well, that being former President Barack Obama, who was called out on Twitter for what some are calling revisionist history about his record with Russia because he was participating in a disinformation and the erosion of democracy conference at the University of Chicago, where he told the audience, as well as I'm guessing this was the host, Jeffrey Goldberg, that he had been encouraged by the global response to aid Ukraine after Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded that country. But he also remarked that when he was president, he recalled having to drag, and that was his words, not mine, U.S. allies to take action against Russia. I will say that as someone who grappled with the incursion into Crimea and the eastern portions of Ukraine, I have been encouraged by the European reaction because in 2014, I often had to drag them kicking and screaming in response in ways that we would have wanted to see from those of us who described ourselves as Western democracies, the former president said. And then, of course, he got a lot of flack about that from people on Twitter and just other politicians and others who were saying that maybe not so fast. He might not have been as detailed in that kind of relation as you are trying to give it now. And we do know that oftentimes after presidents come out of office, they will rewrite the history to suit themselves. And like I said, I am an Obama fan, but there were some things that he did like the drone attacks and others that I wasn't a big fan of. But what are your thoughts about this, what some people are calling revisionist history of Crimea and other parts during his engagement? And I guess that would go to both you and Sasha.
Well, let's go all the way back to Clinton. Clinton dealt with Yeltsin like he was a best buddy, and Yeltsin, when Yeltsin left, he handpicked Putin to be his replacement, and everyone after that, and I'll admit, Republican or Democrat, H.W. Bush, or not H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush. George W. Bush. I'm sorry, George W. Bush has about as much brains as these headsets. He just couldn't even fathom what Putin was like. He said, "Oh, I can see inside this guy's heart, and he's got a good heart." Really? I mean, so that went on. Then, so he kind of let stuff go. Then Obama came in, and Obama tried to deal with Putin. He thought Putin was okay. Look at his speeches on Putin when they met. When they met, it was like, yeah, he's cool, everything's good. Gave him Crimea, and then, then Trump gets into play. Oh yeah, Putin's a good guy. He's okay. He's good. Then Biden gets in. Oh yeah, there's no problem. I mean, are you kidding me? This could have been solved all the way back to George W. Bush when he went over there and said, well, actually, I think Sasha makes a good point. George H.W. Bush, when they were beaten, they were defeated, they should have said, look, we're going to take over, U.S. and NATO are going to take over your nuclear missiles until you guys get your act together. And then once you get your act together, then we'll think about giving them back. But at this point, we're going to take them out of your hands. And so that's my thought.
Chris, a couple of remarks. First of all, about Canada. In all those years after 1914, Canada was the most active country in helping Ukraine financially and otherwise. But most importantly, Canada sent a lot of army officers to train Ukrainian troops. You know why they're fighting so well? They were trained well.
Good.
US also sent personnel, and UK did. But if you take per capita, whether per population or the size of the army, Canada was far in the first place.
Good.
Today, the help is continuous. Yesterday, there was a huge rally in Toronto. The Vitaly Klitschko, former boxer champion and now a mayor of Kiev, he had a 40 minutes speech in English to Ontario lawmakers. And there was a standing ovation. And now Canada is accepting a lot of new immigrants from Ukraine, refugees. And it's not that they're sitting on a Mexican-American border. They are immediately placed in houses, in apartments. The jobs are offered to anybody who wants to work. They have subsidies from government and so on. So it's a very, very good treatment for the refugees in Canada from Ukraine. And by the way, they're accepting now people, Ukrainians, even if they're already in Poland, for example, they can come to Canada without any problems, not just from Ukraine, period. So that's the situation here. Now, Putin is, if you look, I don't want to waste my time and say what he's done in this 20 years that he's at power. It was all the atrocities on his own people, the journalist killings. Remember the Litvinenko affair, who was poisoned by polonium isotope and died. He was really tortured, unfortunately. But many, many more things, and never mind the war in Georgia. So if you'll say every year, especially, it's all started to escalate from 2007, his speech in Munich, where he said that Russia is no longer happy with the world order. Russia is going to fight that and will do whatever. He was unhappy. Russia was a member of G8. It has place in Security Council in UN. It was member of WTO, World Trade Organization. So exactly, tell me what Russia was missing, where he saw that the West is trying to take advantage and do whatever. It just doesn't make any sense, whatever he says. So unfortunately, he became radicalized in around 2010-11 with this nationalist figures like writer Prokhanov, Professor Dugin, and then all his staff around him is radicalized. So now he's more an Ayatollah rather than KGB officer. He's a real Ayatollah, and there is no way to make any deal with him, any peace with him, or anything. He has to be defeated, and Ukraine is doing just exactly that. So Ukraine is doing now what Bush failed to do in 1992, what America failed to do right after Second World War in the early 50s. Ukraine is doing now that, so help it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But speaking of helping it and everything, and this is actually geared toward Chris, I was actually surprised that 6 House Republicans, and I know that I've talked about the political divide and everything, voted against a bill that would direct the White House to report to Congress within 60 days on any U.S. efforts to investigate war crimes in Ukraine and turn over any evidence to international investigations. The bill was introduced in the House last month and passed overwhelmingly. And of course, it was sponsored by a Republican, Representative Michael McCall, and it was definitely then sent up. And there are now some Republicans, including one that I sometimes wonder about what she's all about, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said the bill would hand over authority and our intelligence to the ICJ and ICC that could put our military on trial. I will not vote for globalism and the slow side to become a one world government. Greene said, I will only vote to protect America, our military, and our borders. The other Republicans who voted no were Arizona Representatives Andy Biggs and Paul Gosar, Ohio Representative Warren Davidson, and Pennsylvania Representative Scott Perry. Ironically, Representative Liz Cheney voted no, but that was by mistake, and she has asked the House clerk to amend her vote.
Yes, I mean, it's
go ahead.
I mean, this is I don't think all of us have given up on trying to figure out Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I know Chris Greco sounds like he's a Republican, but honestly, these Republicans that continue to stand by this kind of behavior really makes me wonder. I mean, what is going on, right? I mean, we're better. Like Rocky told his son, you're better than this. Remember when he gave the thing? It's not about how hard you're knocked down, but how hard you keep getting up and moving forward, and you don't just point the finger at everybody and everything. I mean, come on, man. It's just you hear these things, and I just don't get it.
I don't get it either.
Look, let me tell you something. Biden is my president, and that's something. He's our president. He's my president. I didn't vote for the guy, but let me tell you something. He's my president. I accept him for better or for worse. I accept the guy. But I can talk about him now as an active duty officer. I could never talk about the president or any elected official ever.
Right.
That's an Article 34 violation of the UCMJ. I could be court-martialed for that. So I just kept my mouth shut. So for 20 years, I just kept my mouth shut. Now it's nice to be able to say, look, I don't agree with this guy. I think he's an old fart. But the bottom line is that, hey, he's my president, and he's going to be my president. I mean, I just wrote a thing on the private chat, but basically, it's a situation where you got these Republicans out there that are coming up for re-election, or they're doing something, and they figure, I'm going to get these constituents riled up. I'm going to get them emotionally going, and this is how they do things. They take data and they shove it at you, and then they go hyperbole on it, oh,
But
look,
don't,
more
but
people
Chris, don't they also pick hot button issues as well? We talked
Yes.
yesterday about what was going on with certain bills in definitely in Texas, in Tennessee, and in other places. And I saw that there was another one that was recently taking place yesterday, and this was reported by Reuters. But apparently, Alabama lawmakers have passed a bill on Thursday that would criminalize gender affirming health care for transgender youth, with a threat of 10 years in prison for medical providers. And that legislation passed 66 to 28 by the state's House of Representatives on the last day of the legislative season. And it's the latest in what some people are saying is a flurry of measures by Republican-led states dealing with transgender youth. And the American Civil Liberties Union called it the first bill of its kind to make health care for transgender youth a felony, and said it would challenge the bill in court if Republican Governor Kay Ivey signed it into law. So definitely we're seeing that where even people's choices of their lifestyles are also being used as
Well,
hot issues and all of that. But I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts about
Well, so here's my deal on this, is that again, the emotions that go along with that, you got to read the law. I think the law has an age aspect on there. There's a woman that had a 5-year-old daughter, and the 5-year-old daughter was dressing like a boy, and she said that the daughter wanted to be a boy, so she was going to have a gender change, a transgender change on this 5-year-old girl to make her a boy. And I'm sitting back going, first of all, that doesn't need to be apparent. That's child abuse.
Right.
To me, that's bullcrap. You cannot make a cogent. Heck, I'm 66. I still can't make a cogent decision, right? So you're going to take 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, and you're going to sit there and say, okay, you can have a gender change. What happens when they're 18 and 19 and suddenly realize, gee, I really like being a boy. It was okay. How, what are we going to do? Go back and forth and back and forth? You gotta let the kids make a decision when they're 18. When you're 18, you want to be a boy, girl, whatever. You want to have a tail put on your back end, have at it. But until you're 18, you're a minor. And if you're a minor, you cannot have surgery. You cannot have those things unless a parent is present. Now, if you don't have a parent, then that goes off to that mark. What do we do with that? I get that. But if you have a parent, look, the CRT thing. Let's go back to CRT just real quick, and then I swear I'll shut up. When we were talking about CRT, whatever that was, a month ago, whatever it was, they were talking about, Republicans are against CRT. I am not against CRT. What I'm against is the parent not having a say, not making up the curriculum, but having a say in what my kid learns. I need to have a say partnered with the teacher to have my kids learn what they need to learn. That's what they're trying to say, but they're making it out to be a CRT issue. So
and CRT is, in my mind, a lot of times is a red herring, because a lot of times CRT is talked about as if it is a course taught in elementary schools, and I can't find that many people that are actually teaching at that level. It's actually a grad level kind of concept, and basically all it is people wanting to kind of study the entirety of our history. And like I said, when we were talking about Ben Franklin yesterday, that's just talking about the warts and all. And we all have warts. I mean, I've got some warts, and I'm sure that all of us on this panel have some warts as well. So it's just a matter of, if you're going to talk about historical figures, that you don't just talk about the legacy. And thank you for acknowledging my parents' legacy and everything. But I'm sure that if I go far enough back, I'll probably find some warts even in the family trees and all of that and everything. So we're going to talk about the legacies, that you talk about the entirety of the legacy, and you just analyze it if you are going to be that kind of historical figure. And that's what my mind CRT is. But it's very much of a grad level type course. It's not only, I don't even think it's taught, as we heard from our young student, and I think Nick invited him earlier today, that it's even taught that much on the college level and all of that. And by the way, you are right. The bill would make it a felony punishable with up to 10 years in prison to provide medical care, including hormone treatment, puberty blockers, and gender reassignment surgery to minors. So that is what the bill is talking about, is the minor aspect. And
as lawyers would say, it's not that easy. Okay, and here's the reason why. Since my mom was a nurse, and she was like the head of Tampa General Hospital in the 1940s, and so she came across a lot of different. And she also did grad work and worked at Bellevue in New York. And she goes, you come across people that have both sexual organs. Okay. Right. Now, what the law? Now, this is the problem with lawyers and politicians, all this garbage trying to get into science. Decisions, unfortunately, whether these bills like it or not, need to be made sometimes right after birth. So when you draft a law improperly, which is this probably done, you run into a problem that kids born with both genitals, which does happen, hermaphrodites, basically.
Yes.
We need to make a decision. Oh, wait a minute. We can't do anything because it's a 10-year felony. You see the problem? So what happens is lawyers and politicians are interjecting themselves into science, which they have no clue what they're doing. And they do it all the time, Mark.
I hear what you're saying, but Nick, I want to get to another part of the world. I know we love talking world politics, and we are the world edition. I've got to get to another part of the world really quickly, because there is a group of people that are touring the world. They're touring the world because, we talk about what Russia may become, and what some people say Russia may become is a monarchy, or may go back to monarchy. And apparently Prince Williams and Kate have embarked on a 3-country tour of the Caribbean as part of an extended royal celebration of Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee, commemorating her 70th year on the throne. And that's a long time to be on the throne. But the trip to Belize, Jamaica, and the Bahamas, 3 of the 14 former colonies that officially still count the Queen as their head of state, was marred by controversy from the start, because the couple has been met by protesters at all 3 stops. And a group of prominent Jamaican leaders released a letter demanding reparations for the suffering of our ancestors caused by the monarchy's legacy of slave trade and colonialism. The young royals were also criticized for multiple unflattering photo opportunities, including touching children and all of this and everything. And during a public meeting, Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness announced his country is ready to leave the British realm and establish itself as an independent, fully developed, and prosperous nation. Belize, and I've heard great things about Belize, also recently announced that it was launching a review of potential changes to its own constitution, including whether it should become independent. And late last year, Barbados officially abandoned the monarchy, becoming the first Caribbean nation to replace the Queen as head of state in more than 4 decades. And what this article is asking is the British monarchy totally about to be dead, and are we about to just see the complete collapse of the British?
It's left over from feudal times, and I was listening to a documentary about the Romanov family in Russia. Okay, did you know one of the last surviving Romanov families lived near Sasha? It was actually the younger sister of Nicholas Romanov, who was executed, migrated over, took a boat to Toronto, and lived there for the rest of her life in a very modest house, had a couple of kids that lived there. So you actually have Russian royalty living near Sasha Star right now as we speak. But basically, it's kind of off with their heads. But before we get there, let's do a real quick clip on Ukraine. This came to us from Kiev. Just real quick.
Від Конгресу США
Слава Україна!
до Ради Європи. За місяць війни до нашої боротьби долучилися найвпливовіші організації, компанії та люди світу. Леонардо Ді Капріо, Міла Куніс, Ілон Маск, Девід Бекхем.
Я передаю свій інстаграм-аккаунт Харківському перинатальному центру.
І тепер ніхто і ніколи не сплутає нас із сусідами.
Ukraine.
І не спитає, де ця Україна. Весь світ з Україною.
Spicy.
I love that.
Yeah, I thought it was really
and
well
we
done.
have the show coming up later on this evening with Sasha.
Yeah,
in
it's
about,
actually coming on right after this show.
in about 20 minutes is when that's coming on. But I wanted to come back because I know we've had some of the guests on that are from some of these other monarchies, because there are monarchies in the country, including Sweden, Norway, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And I think we've had representatives from at least one or two of those on our lovely network here. But one of the things that they said that they have done, which is really smart, is that they have stayed under the radar of media. And I know that on Monday we oftentimes talk about media, and they've retreated into what this article calls bourgeois semi-obscurity and all of that, where they have wisely stayed, whereas the English monarchy likes to stay in the news, sometimes for bad things, including this whole scandal involving one of the princes and even allegations of racism from the one that was married to Markle and everything. So they can't seem to stay out of the news, where some of the other monarchs, they're doing really smart. They're staying, out of the news totally. They're just kind of like saying, we'll do our governing in whatever ways we're going to govern, but we're not going to do it in front of the world theater and all of that. So, Nick, what are your thoughts about that? Because we have a media show. So, are these other monarchs being very smart by staying out of the media limelight?
Just like everything, JD stands just depends. There are some monarchs, like who's on our show, the Prince of Liechtenstein,
Right.
who's on, and we actually have right as you were doing it, we had another royalty, I think, that was on the Swiss Impact show.
Mhm.
It really just depends. Remember, some of the reason the monarchy exists and gets funded is there's purportedly to be the goodwill ambassador. Everybody loves them, all this other stuff. Well, in that case, yeah, using the media is good for them. Then some of them, not so good. And so it's best to stay out of the limelight. So it really depends on who you are and what you want to do. The ones in Canada, they stayed out of the limelight. Well, think about it.
They totally take that.
The family was slaughtered in Russia. Now, do you want to get up and say, "Hey, I'm a Romanov"?
No, you don't want to do. You don't want to do that. But the other thing that I wonder about is how many of our folks, and this comes back to one of our other favorite topics, which is education here on this network. How many people, and maybe Chris has got an idea. He's got family members that are in the military currently, so these are young people and everything. But how many of our young people actually realize that there are countries literally off of our border that are still English run? I just named 3 of them in the course of the article, and I could also put, I think, Bermuda and a couple of others in there. And I wonder how many people even, 1, know that, or 2, care about that, because they literally are off of our border.
Well, I'll tell you who cares about Jamaica, right? And I'm a Republican, but I'm not that type of Republican. Are the ones that are accusing Kamala Harris of her ancestors of owning slaves, which is unproven. Much as I'd love for that to be proven, it's still unproven whether or not that is true. But by gosh, if you ask people that are in Trump's circle, they'll say in a minute, "Oh yeah, they were slave owners." And it's like, I bet there's nothing proven on that. So yeah, they know Jamaica. They know Jamaica, But hey, yeah, Belize, the rest of those areas, at one point, Bermuda was, or Bahamas were British owned.
Well,
they got their independence in 1970.
Well, I think this, it just goes to show that colonialism and imperialism is definitely something in the world order that's just not as accepted today. And I think that Queen Elizabeth is the one monarch that's been able to hold the monarchy together. Whether that's going to happen now I watched 4 seasons of The Crown, really got a sense of that, even though it was dramatized, the history of, all of these different colonies, including India, where my family is from. The British ruled India for over 200 plus years. And, here we go. It's I think going to be hard to hold, but I believe in democracy, and I don't think any family should have more rights or privileges than another if you truly are a democratic government. Of course, there's history and tradition, and I think that it's one of those balances. But I can totally empathize with these Caribbean nations that want to have their own freedom, their own democracy, and we didn't really get into the sanctions. I want to move into some domestic politics, but the bottom line is the main sanction is threatening Ukraine or Russia with no imports of oil. So the EU has done that, restricting trade. But listening to Sasha Starr on the show, I get the sense that it's going to have to be more than that. I mean, we're just going to have to give our faith in the Ukrainian people and give them the resources they need so that they can win this war. That's what it really is about.
No, that makes sense. And one of the things that I know you are very passionate about and everything is infrastructure. And apparently, one of our international infrastructure allies has run into a problem with their infrastructure because they had an island wide power failure, and that is Puerto Rico. And that is part of their perennially troubled electric grid. And within that country, as of early Friday, nearly 500,000 customers were in the dark, and power is slowly being restored to that small country and a small island, I should say, over there. And definitely that is a frustrating continuation of the hardships brought by an unreliable electric grid. And by the way, the problems have persisted even after a private Canadian American consortium, Luma, took over electricity transmission and distribution from Puerto Rico's public utility last June with a pledge to reduce the frequency of outages. Is this something that we could run into here as well? I mean, like I said, I know that this is a smaller kind of province and island and all of that, but is this something that we could run into as well? I know there was a major blackout, I want to say in New York and a couple of other places, but is that something that folks are frustrated by even locally, this idea that the infrastructure isn't ready, and much less a war, we could all just be sitting in the dark in a while if the infrastructure in that sense isn't together?
I'll tell you, this is the normal strategy for winning a war. The first thing you do is you demoralize the population that you're about to hit with bombs and whatever else. And that's what we did in Serbia. We had carbon bombs that basically blew up an air burst, and they would wrap themselves around the power grid and knock out power without injuring one person. So they tried that, and it was very successful. So I mean, this power grid stuff we kind of really take it for granted. I mean, we're all sitting here at our computers just having a good time. I mean, the bottom line is that power is generated by somebody, and that's but certainly not us. So I mean, hey, so Puerto Rico, they want to solve that. Solar and wind, man. Solar and wind would help to solve that. They ought to be our testing point.
Yeah, I think, and we're going to get into that next week. I've sometimes preparing for the show. One of the best parts of being the host of this show is I have to read a lot just about different parts of the world. And I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about military logistics and the challenges that Russia's had, but could be having similar types of challenges in the United States. So, Chris, I'm going to research that and ask you just about tactical military strategy, logistics, infrastructure. These things are important to not only win wars, but for the defense and security of our country. Real quickly, let's shift to domestic politics. Just a quick real thing as we get ready to end the hour. The New York Attorney General has asked that Trump be held in contempt of court for not turning over documents into an investigation of business. Nancy Pelosi has tested positive for the COVID virus. And an FBI arrested two men said it poses federal officers and duped Secret Service agents. And Medicare will cover the Alzheimer's drug disease, Aduhelm, for clinical trials, limiting the reach of a treatment with uncertain benefits and risks. And finally, Marine Le Pen, does this sound familiar? She is trying to revamp her image and is threatening to upend the French election. So they have their own version of Donald J. Trump.
They've got their own version of everything. And we may have brought this up before, but one of the other things that I was saw when I was researching news and everything is, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about this, there's some thought that the unions are making a comeback. Do you see unions making a comeback and all of that? Because that's something that I'm reading and hearing more about. I've actually got friends in the unions, more like education unions, and some that are involved in like some of the fast food worker unions as well. But they had a major decline. So are unions going to make a comeback in the year of 2022, 2023?
It's a definite maybe. I mean, the thing is, we haven't seen unions in a long time since Reagan decided to create massive inequality in the United States using the Great Divide. And he did so by busting the unions to start with, lowering the top income tax rate down to an unsustainable income tax rate, and enriching the 1%, which right now, as we know, the top 5% own 70% of all the assets in the United States. So people like Micah, who's just joined us, have zero opportunity to be successful unless there's, and by the way, an economist told me there's 3 ways you can be successful, Micah. Number 1, you inherit it. Now, if you inherit it, you'll be successful. Number 2, you marry into it. Okay, in other words, and I've had some friends of mine actually did, married into royalty. They're successful. 3rd way, become a doctor. And that was it.
This is
an economics professor.
I'm glad we got Micah here because I had questions.
I just gave you the 3 maps to success.
Yeah, maybe econ professors like, I don't know, 3.5. I feel like we're close to doctor. We probably fall in the same category, but.
Yeah. Micah, what do you think about unions? Are your students talking about unions?
Young people don't have
interested
unions.
in
Reagan
unions?
busted them years ago.
I'm very interested in unions. I know there was a whole move for the PRO Act in, I believe, 2020, which failed. The Democratic Socialists of America were behind it, and they thought like this was the battle they needed to win, and unfortunately they did not win that battle. I think that ever since Taft-Hartley, American unions have basically been sabotaged because we made good unions illegal and forced them into this kind of weird status unionism where you can only have a union at a single company instead of a trade or a sector. And this is just not a very effective way of doing this. We also have like right to work laws, which make unions bargain for workers who don't contribute to them, which is like the worst idea ever. So I think if we're going to see an actual rise of unions in the United States, that's more than just kind of an end to their decline and like a marginal increase. We're going to need to completely overhaul our labor laws so we can have unions like legally, like unions they have in countries like Denmark, which are really expansive, really large, and are able to act in a way that is effective economically speaking.
Well, Micah,
another way to become successful. You go to Sasha has a show Wednesday at 1:00 about investing, and they don't teach you this in school. You can go to school forever, Micah. You're wasting your bloody time because unless you actually get into the market, go to Sasha's show on Wednesday at 1:00. You actually invest in the market, and you do it young while you're young, and do it. And they don't teach you this in school. In other words, open up a TD Ameritrade trade account and start buying stocks. Do you know why you want to buy stocks? Because unions are crushed. Reagan did it. In order to become one of the 1%, you have to be an owner. In other words, you need to own stocks in the companies that quash unions, such as Amazon.
Wait a minute, you have to think. Wait a minute, Nick. You have to think like an owner.
Like an owner, exactly.
Like that show that we got.
Like the GM show.
Like an owner.
The GM. We have a GM show that says "Think like an owner."
Rachel Marshall, the real GM.
You can complain all you want about unions. The Republicans and Reagan destroyed them. It's dead. It's over. Okay, so you need to join the other side, which is the owners, the capitalist. So you go to Sasha's show and you become a great capitalist. And then once you invest in stocks, you have a big portfolio then you go around telling people unions suck. Okay.
But before we say that,
it's about
overall, unions are very much anti-American creation, because really what happened is that people who are really, I can call them deplorables, not to look for the right words, that one will do. They are not going to join the union because they are deplorables. Now, people who are a little bit better than that, they are becoming to be very egoistical, and they will not join to be together into something, because they will always accuse other people in a union that they're getting more perks for themselves, and they have to fight these people or so on. So in the meantime, they can keep it as a club, basically, and fight each other. Yeah. Rather than that, I don't see that they could play.
I see that, and I know we're going to wind down and everything. I think we got about 5 more minutes, and then we got to get to Steve's closeout. But before we close out, since Micah did join us, I was going to ask him, how much did you actually learn about the monarchies? We were talking about this earlier, and the parts of the world that are actually governed by Britain and other past imperialism countries that are off to our coast. We were talking about Belize and Jamaica and that royal visit. So I was just wondering, as a young person, how much of that did you actually learn either in high school or college, or do you even pay attention to the fact that there are parts of the world that are near us that are also governed by other European nations, such as, like I said, Bermuda in the past and Belize right now?
Well, I did pay attention. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to history. I love history so much. But in regards to how much I learned in high school, not a ton. Unfortunately, I think that our history tends to skim over atrocities. Now, it usually skims over our atrocities pretty hard. Like, just completely ignore those, and then we'll talk a bit about the Europeans because they're not really us. And then we'll talk a ton about the atrocities that happened in the parts of the world that are not European, because we have no connection to them whatsoever. In college, though, definitely. College, they teach you all this stuff. It's just constant, trigger warnings. Like, you just walk in and now we're talking about a new genocide, a new terrible event that has happened in human history. But I think that's an important thing, because in order for us not to repeat the mistakes of the past, we must know about them.
Yeah. And one of the last things, and then like I said, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and everything, is some people are asking, and maybe you want to comment on this, Micah, is does the war in Ukraine justify an even bigger U.S. military budget? Because there is a big U.S. military budget, and some people are wondering, do we need to increase our budget so that we can help the people in the Ukraine? Chris, you're used to be in the military. Micah, you're a student. What are your thoughts before we turn it over to Steve for the last comments?
Well, I'll tell you, I was part of the Department of Defense, and I did, in fact, used to submit budgets. And the old, we need 40,000. Let's ask for 80,000, and hopefully we'll get 20,000. That is almost like verbatim how the situation works with budgeting aspects. But ever since the military has been made out as being this grand and glorious situation, and hey, I get it, man. Guys over in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they took a bullet for us. I get it. But let me tell you something. If the amount of money that's going to the Department of Defense, I'll tell you where it goes. It goes into contractors. That's where it goes. And let me tell you something. I was a government contractor. You pay 3, 4, 5 times, sometimes 10 times the amount that you would pay a government worker to do the same job, and a contractor does it because they don't want that overhead. So that's my take on the budget aspects, and it's something that we got to stop. We got to tell the Department of Defense, we're going to stop here, and you guys are going to have to just come down and figure out what to do with these weapon systems.
Micah, quick answer, and then Steve, close out.
I fully agree with him 100%. He's correct. We spend that Russia spends 8% as much as we do. We spend a lot of money. We're way better than everybody else, not even close. If we're trying to get more money going to the actual defensive operations, we should work on saving all of this money that's currently being completely wasted.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. We'll have to continue the discussion next week. We're up for the hour. Mark, move me out so we can close.
I'm going to do that right now, moving everybody out with you.
Please stay with me as we close out the show. We wanted to thank you all for being with us on Pod TV's World Edition, Roku TV. And actually, Andy Andrews will be on April 18th. So I apologize for that. He just emailed me. I want to take a moment as a point of privilege, personal privilege. Normally, I don't talk about personal matters and situations, but I wanted to take a moment to honor a North Carolina leader who passed away last week, tragically, of pneumonia at the age of 69. His name was Howard Manning, and he was the executive director of an organization called Dorcas Ministries. Dorcas Ministries is an organization that basically provides homeless services, food pantries, thrift stores, all kinds of things for those who are really in need in North Carolina. In 2007, in the town of Cary, they actually ended up moving into a Cary shopping plaza. And they ended up providing service to thousands of North Carolinians. I can't think of a better, more inspiring leader and gracious person than Howard Manning. Elected officials across the region would love seeing him on Thanksgiving morning before COVID at the breakfast at Prestonwood Club, where he would laugh and smile. He was so proud of the differences he could make in people's lives. You could see the energy and passion. When I would meet with Howard, sometimes I would feel so much love and energy throughout my whole body for hours, and it would seem like it would last for days. We're so very sorry for the loss to Dorcas Ministry, to Rose Cornelius and the executive directors and team at Dorcas Ministries, and to the town of Cary, and to the many leaders across the state who looked upon him with inspiration. I am very sad today to say goodbye to an old friend. But what makes me the saddest is that during the pandemic, I was never able to give him a call. I was never able to thank him for what a great person and influence he'd been on me. The lesson learned as I tried to end this monologue not in tears is that take a moment in our lives to slow down and thank those who mean a lot to us. Give them a hug, give them a smile. I wish I'd had one more opportunity to thank Howard Manning for being a great leader and a great friend. I know there are many people around the region who feel the same way, but the best way we can honor him is to try to live our lives as much as we can by making a difference. Howard, may you rest in peace, and your legacy will never die, for you will always be in our hearts. On that note, we thank you for being on World Edition with us, and we will be back on Monday for another edition. For our family to yours, be safe wherever you are. Thank you.